Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour and welcome. My name is Caitlin Byrne and I'm the director of the Griffith Asia Institute, and together with my colleagues from the Institute, in particular from the Pacific Hub, it's my great pleasure to welcome you all, whether you're joining us via Zoom, Facebook or YouTube, to today's seminar. And we'll be exploring the question, New Caledonia towards a new Pacific nation. To begin, let me respectfully acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting. For me, here in Brisbane, that's the Turrbal and Jagera people. But of course, there are many of you joining us from many lands. And in the spirit of reconciliation, I pay my respects to elders past and present, and I extend that respect to all First Nations peoples. And I'd like to make a special mention of our audience today. We know that many of you are tuning in locally, but also from right across the region, particularly from across the Pacific, and welcome. I'd like to make special mention of a couple of guests here today. Dame Meg Taylor, Secretary General of the Pacific Islands Forum. SG, welcome back, albeit virtually, to Griffith Asia Institute. Also, the Honourable Ralph Raganvanu, MP and Leader of the Opposition in Vanuatu. Another person that's also visited the Griffith Asia Institute and spoken to our audiences, albeit a little while ago in 2013. And also the Honourable Moitai Brotherson, Deputy for French Polynesia in the French National Assembly. Pastor James Bhagawan, General Secretary of the Pacific Conference of Churches. And I know there are many more distinguished guests, and you are all very welcome here today. In bringing this seminar to you, I'm really delighted that we have an opportunity to highlight our Pacific Hub. It's a fairly recent initiative established at the Griffith Asia Institute, really over the last 6 to 12 months, but it builds on the established teaching, research and capacity building collaborations that Griffith is very proud to be involved in with partners right across the Pacific region. And it involves a whole lot of different research areas, from tourism to climate change adaptation, to media, to marine ecosystems, from central banking and finance to education, sports, culture and the arts, just to name a few. Led by Dr. Tess Newton-Kane, the Pacific Hub adds a really important dimension to the profile of the Institute and the conversations that we're able to have. And it draws in particular on Queensland's very special geographic, historic, commercial and cultural relationship with Pacific Island nations. If there's one driving purpose behind this work that I'd really put to it, I think it's to give voice to the many perspectives of our region and to generate conversations that build and contribute to informed debate, but also generate understanding and empathy across our respective communities. And today's seminar is no exception. So in just a couple of weeks, on the 4th of October, New Caledonians will vote in a referendum on their political future. Long-term residents of the nation, of the French Pacific dependency, one of Australia's closest neighbours, will vote yes or no on independence from France. And it's not necessarily a straightforward proposition, but it is a significant moment, not just in our region, but even more broadly. And our panel of speakers will really be delving into the issues and telling us why. So let me introduce them briefly to you. Today's conversation will be led by Nick McClellan. Nick McClellan is no stranger to the region. He's a correspondent for the Islands Business magazine and other Pacific media. He's well known across the region and has reported extensively on New Caledonia and politics in the region. He's also the recipient of the Sean Dorney Pacific Journalism Award for 2020. Nick, it's great to have you with us again today. And Nick will be joined by a number of panellists. Firstly, Patricia Goa, an elected member of New Caledonia's Congress representing the pro-independence Union Nationale pour Independance. My French needs a little bit of work. She lives in Bako tribe in New Caledonia's Northern Province and works as an advisor to Provincial President Paul Neotin. I'd also like to welcome Magalia Tangal, a former journalist who serves in the New Caledonian Northern Provincial Assembly. Magalia is a member of Union Caledonian Party. She is coordinator of the Yes campaign for the independence movement, FLNKS. and Charles Weah. Born in Uvea in the Loyalty Islands, Charles completed university degrees in Samoa and Australia and has served in the FLNKS, representative to Australia and at meetings of the Melanesian Spearhead Group. This is a special panel, it's a special conversation, and we're really delighted to bring it to you today. We know that many of you will want to be joining in the conversation, and you can do that by sharing your questions via the Q&A function. You'll find that at the bottom of your screen, and you can submit questions at any time during the event, and I know Nick will be keeping an eye on those. For now, that's enough for me. Let me welcome Nick to the floor and our panelists. Thank you again for joining us. I think we're in for a great conversation. Over to you, Nick.
Caitlin Byrne, thank you very much, and thank you to Griffith University for hosting this webinar. It's a great pleasure to be with you today, and I'm broadcasting from Melbourne, Australia, on the land of the Kulin people, acknowledging land that was never ceded. I'd like to welcome our participants today in putting together this seminar. The organisers approached representatives of the 4 main parliamentary groups in New Caledonia's Congress. Not everyone could participate, but we've received responses from a number of players. And as mentioned, I'd like to introduce Mangali Tingal, Patricia Goa, and Charles Weah, who'll be joining us today. To set the scene, I might just give a quick introduction for people who aren't as aware about current developments in New Caledonia in recent times. After violent conflicts in the 1980s, a series of agreements were forged between the French state, opponents of independence, and members of the Kanak Independence Coalition, the FLNKS, the Kanak Socialist National Liberation Front. The Noumea Agreement of 1988 was an innovative framework to establish a decolonisation process for New Caledonia, allowing long-term residents of the French Pacific dependency to determine their future political status after a long transition. The Noumea Accord created new political institutions, including 3 provincial assemblies in the North, South and Loyalty Islands. It established a national congress with representatives from those 3 provinces, a multi-party collegial government that includes both supporters and opponents of independence, and a Kanak customary senate. Over the 20 years since the signing of that agreement in 1998, there's been a progressive transfer of legal and administrative powers over many sectors of economy and society from Paris to Noumea. And the French government has supported a range of measures for economic, social and cultural rebalancing, the term used in the accord. That's seen major changes, including the development of key industries, such as the construction of new smelters for nickel. The export of nickel ore and nickel metals, a major economic resource for this French Pacific state. After 20 years, the original Noumea Accord agreed that there would be provision for a series of referendum on self-determination to determine the possible transfer of the remaining powers of sovereignty over defence, foreign policy, currency, and more. Uniquely, the Noumea Accord doesn't just have one referendum to determine future political status. It allows for up to 3 referenda, not just one, and that's uncommon when you look internationally. The first referendum under the Accord was held in November 2018, just nearly 2 years ago. 43% of those who participated voted yes to independence, nearly 57% voting no to remain with the French Republic. That's a clear vote for the status quo, but many pundits, polling, politicians had predicted a much weaker result for the independence movement. And I think it's fair to say many were shocked at the strength of support from particularly the Kanak people, but other supporters of independence. That's moved on 2 years to a second referendum, which will be held on the 4th of October this year. 2 years on, however, the referendum comes at a changed context, obviously with the global coronavirus pandemic creating major economic and social changes in New Caledonia. And today we want to speak to our panelists and ask them not just about the referendum, but about the current state of play. It's rare to hear voices directly from New Caledonia in the broader Pacific, so we thank them for their participation. As Professor Byrne has mentioned, there'll be an opportunity for people to submit questions through the Q&A function of this Zoom or through those listening through Facebook, and staff from Griffith Asia Institute will be passing those on. But first I might start just by asking our three panelists to really comment on the current situation and what do they see as the main challenges facing New Caledonia on its path to decolonisation. If I could begin by speaking to you, Patricia Goa, and asking for your comments.
Before I start, I'd like to, I'll do it in French. Je sais pas pourquoi je suis émue, hein. Je voulais vous remercier et je voulais ça fait 30 ans que j'ai pas eu l'occasion d'avoir mes amis australiens, on va dire ça comme ça, ou mes amis du Pacifique. Donc avant que j'essaye de reprendre un anglais que j'ai oublié depuis 20 ans, je voudrais vous dire bonjour. Bonjour à tous ceux qui nous regardent.
So to my friends in Australia who I haven't seen for 30 years, to people across the Pacific, before I speak in English, I want to salute you and thank you for the welcome.
Merci. Et aussi faire en sorte que les élus, les différentes personnalités qui nous suivent aujourd'hui reçoivent le bonjour de Kanak et Nouvelle-Calédonie. Donc c'est important pour moi de le dire. And if I have to say in a few points, but you'll excuse me because it's been nearly 20 years since I haven't been able to speak in English. But the main focus for us and the main challenges, especially for the independentist groups, whether they're in the Congress or in any provincial assemblies, we really have to succeed. And I'm looking at the French state in saying it has to succeed in decolonization. It's the first time. That's the first challenge. The particularity of Kanaki struggle is that he was able to put it accord, and especially the Numea Accord, 3 poles, 3 actions, where you are going to ask its population whether you want to accede to, whether you want to come to sovereignty, whether you want to be independent. 3 times. It's been done in 2018. It's going to be done in 2020. And if we don't succeed in 2020, we are going towards 2022. The main thing I want to see is that once Jean-Marie Chibao said, whether we are going to a path where even at the end of the path, if there's only one Caledonian, one Kanak living on this land, we will still struggling for our sovereignty. And that is really important. And that is what I want to say. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Patricia. Magali, I pose the same question to you about the challenges facing New Caledonia and your vision of the key steps before you.
Thank you, Nick. So on my turn, I'll acknowledge all the participants and also the honorable members of parliament who have joined this webinar. Thanks to Griffith University as well to make it happen, and to you for this very important seminar for the region. So as Patricia said, of course, that for us the main challenge is to succeed this decolonization, but no mistakes. It's the responsibility of France to achieve this decolonization. But for us as Kanak people, we need to again educate our people to understand what is really important when we talk about our decolonization. So we may say, well, decolonization means independence for us in the FLNKS. Yes, we are on the path of decolonization to go to our independence. So maybe one of our challenges has, so I joined Patricia on the success of the decolonization, and for France to achieve this decolonization in our country here is their best challenge. They're going to make history if they achieve this decolonization in the Pacific here with us. So for us, when our elders put our people on the first path of the decolonization, they have decided to sign two accords, Nouméa Accords and Matignon-Oudinot Accords. This is our way to go to the decolonization. So we're talking also on the decolonization of mentalities, to try to think after the independence. We're talking also, it's quite a big challenge for us to talk about independence as an opportunity. Why? Because since then, independence is scary here for people. So we have to talk to people. We have to educate, as I said, through meetings, discussion, and we're talking about living together. So yes, our best challenges is to succeed, to achieve this decolonization. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you. And Charles Weah, would you like to make a few comments on the challenges facing New Caledonians as they move forward on this path set out by the Nouméa Accord? Charles, can you hear us?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
Yes. Thank you, Nick. I'm going to follow my two colleagues who just gave their arguments and point of view in relation with New Caledonia future. So I would like to say thank you to the Griffith University, and also to you, Nick, as a facilitator, and also hi to the participants, and particularly some of the member of parliament. So in relation with your question, Nick, I will say that actually in New Caledonia, regarding the organization of the referendum, I can say that people now are ready to go to vote for the second time after the referendum in 2018. I will say that in relation with some of the challenges that we've been challenging, especially for the FNKs, I can say that we are ready. We are ready to challenge the political vision in the sense that the FNKs has already explained already explained to the people of New Caledonia and also to the French government about how New Caledonia would be, how we can take the responsibility to manage the future of country as independent states, as independent nation. That's why that in terms of the challenges, we say that we are ready, concretely and practically, to take over the challenges as independent nation in future over the referendum of the 4th of October.
Nick?
Yes, Patricia, please.
Yeah. I really have to emphasize on one thing. When we did the vote in 2018, that was the chance for us to enter the numbers, just to know who is voting, just to know who is today capable of talking about sovereignty. And that was really important, that today we understand that we're not talking only for the Kanak people. The importance that we have to emphasize today is that even if we are a majority of yes, as we may say, it's really a status or a project for all Caledonians living in Kanaki. It's not just for us that today we are fighting or we are struggling. Let's not oppose all the people living on this land. Really, today we know that people are not afraid of anymore of claiming where they are from. And that is really, to my sense, something important. We are talking about 20 years of stability or 30 years of stability. With the rebalancing, we are being able to do our own law. We have been able to redefine some of our projects. And that is really important. We're talking about education. We are talking about health. We are talking about our youth and our women. And that is very important to understand. We're not just talking about a people, we are talking about a nation to be.
I think as a reporter, I was in New Caledonia covering the 2018 referendum and noticed that one of the main concerns from people who were either opposed to independence or wavering about their vote was concern about what it would mean economically. People concerned that the loss of French funding would affect their livelihoods, their well-being, and so on. Magali, as you're campaigning today, how do you respond to the challenge that comes from opponents of independence, that this move to sovereignty would be a significant economic setback and impact people's livelihoods and well-being?
Thank you, Nick. Exactly, in 2018, when we started the campaign, the Yes campaign, we didn't know that we had to talk about economics funding from France. It's actually when we start to talk to people and the opponent of the independence start to talk about the French founding that we had to again educate. So from 2018 to now, we have to always answer that part of the independence. But it's not only talking about founding, but because that question came from the fore and from the opposite of the independence. So what we saying to people when they ask this? First of all, France, it's only 10% in our founding today in 2020. We're talking about 10%. So well, it's like a lot of money, but it's not all our money. And if that country is that that developed, it's not only because of France, it's also because there's independence, there's a Nouméa Accord. France do what they must do through this political accord. So after the independence, how can we survive without French money? We'll talk with France after the independence. This is going to be our first cooperation, and it's going to be our first friend nation, as far as our brothers and sisters from the Pacific region, but also France. So, and France is paying here for his presence here. We're talking about army, we're talking about the French embassy, French Haut Commissariat. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about French money. Yeah?
Patricia, you live in the Northern Province,
yeah.
And one of the major changes that's come over the last 20 years under the Nouméa Accord has been some significant changes in the mining industry, and particularly the construction of new smelters. Historically, there's been a smelter from Société Le Nickel in Nouméa, which is transforming New Caledonia's vast reserves of nickel into metal for export. There's been now a new plant in the south at Goro, controlled currently by the Vale Corporation from Brazil. And in the north, a major project at Koniambo, a major smelter with the Northern Province. At a time of major change internationally, can you tell us a little bit about both the importance of these changes in the mining and smelting sector, but particularly what it's meant for people living in the north, where you live outside the provincial capital?
Before I go any further, Nick, I'd like to I'd like to come back to what Magali said, and that's very, very important. She said one of the difficulties we have here is that apart from saying you will not be able to work without French money, you will not be able to work without, to study without French money. You will not be able to heal yourself without French money. Something happened in the world a few months ago, a crisis, a major crisis, a pandemic, right? COVID, the coronavirus. That question is addressed to the whole world. We can't keep on doing what we've been doing so far. It's just impossible. We have to change the way we look at the economy. We have to change the way we look at how to heal ourselves. We have to change the way we eat every day. And that is one of the main challenges that we have to go through. But it's not only a challenge for myself. It's because I'm seeing really myself as someone from the Pacific. It's really how I see the world from now on and tomorrow. And that it's very important because we are capable of. And some way along the path, we forgot ourselves. And it's really important that humanity comes back to the center. And that's what he's saying in what we are looking at. You're talking about nickels. New Caledonia holds 1/4 of the world's nickel resources. 1/4. Nickel sector is the first employer in New Caledonia. The first. Before the public function. Nickel resources is not renewable. So we really have to think of how we work for future generation. And that's what Kanak is saying. That's what our cultural heritage is saying. But not only to us in Kanaki, in the Pacific. Kanaki Nouvelle-Calédonie must ensure return on investment and ensure value added profit for our country. That's how we have to think. The Northern Plant Kindness, because you've been talking about it, is a major player in the economic rebalancing of our country. Nick, as you know, I work a lot on custom land. It's really another issue for myself and for the whole New Caledonia, or Kanaki Nouvelle-Calédonie. It's an important issue because of what? Because today we hear that you are not capable of making enterprise, of making value on your land. You are not capable. Look, everyone is going and sitting in the capital. It's true. But if we didn't imagine what could retenir the people in the northern province, we will be more today in the capital city. And it's really important to understand that. We are capable of. We really have to rethink our model wherever we are. And especially on our custom land. And something that is struggling really today is, what do you want for tomorrow? We are at the end of the path. We can't, everything that you have imagined, everything that we are coming through, we are at the end of the path. We have to change our thinking in everything we are doing today. But it's not just only us. The whole world has to remodel the way we want to be for the future generation. Do I make myself understand?
Absolutely, because I think the experience that New Caledonia has gone through engaging with mining companies, for example, is a debate that's happening in Papua New Guinea, in Australia, in countries around the region about how natural resources can be managed both for economic benefit, but for future generations, the environmental, social impacts of large corporations. And Charles, I might ask you, to what extent is New Caledonia's engagement with the region part of this discussion? In 2016, New Caledonia and French Polynesia became full members of the Pacific Islands Forum through the Melanesian Spearhead Group, where the FLNKS is a member of the sub-regional group. There's a lot more engagement with neighbouring countries, including trade agreements with Vanuatu and so on. How much is this path involved in engaging with the wider region, and what importance do you place on that engagement?
Yes, I would say that it is a natural engagement for New Caledonia as a Pacific country and a Pacific nation, especially if New Caledonia become independent. What's important relationship that we have actually with the Pacific Island Forum and also with the MSG, Malaysian Trade Group, is effectively to get more involved New Caledonia inside the region. So it is geopolitically important because not only because most of the countries in the South Pacific region have been involved in supporting the Caledonia, not only on the list of the C24, but also in the struggle for the Kanak people. So it is what I said before, that it is a natural support, it is a natural solidarity that we had from those countries. Now the main challenge now is to become as an independent country, to get more involved in this regional organization. So for us, what the important thing today is to have the support, and also to get more involved New Caledonia as New Caledonian government, because now since Tahiti and New Caledonia became member of the Pacific Island Forum organization, for us it was an important step in terms of this insertion, and I would say that it was FNK's hope, that's FNK's vision, to get more involved New Caledonia in the region. As while before, it was the French government, the French ideological vision were more were more considered. As you know, Nick, I think last year or before last year, when Prime Minister, the President Macron came in not only in Caledonia but also in Australia, was talking about the Indo-Pacific strategy of France, and that's why we say that even though now New Caledonia, now France is encouraging us, is supporting New Caledonia in this process of decolonization. But beyond that, we know that France has a lot of geopolitical interest in this region. That's why that now we have to become more vigilant, become more careful about how France get involved inside those interaction strategies.
Bashar, the government of New Caledonia has been very active in its own right in the region. And for example, now there are representatives of the government of New Caledonia rather than the government of France serving in embassies in Australia, in New Zealand, in Fiji. Don't you see that? Do you agree that the government in itself is now acting to engage with other neighbouring Pacific Island states, as well as major powers like Australia and New Zealand?
Yes, yes, because I mean, it was the Vencas was involved inside this process to put some of the delegates of New Caledonian government inside those French embassies in Australia and New Zealand and Fiji and Papua New Guinea and Vanuatu. Because we need to establish more economic partnership and relationship. But at the same time, we have, I mean, the FENICA has to become more vigilant in terms of strategic, because now we know that the French government is a member of the Pacific Island Forum. But at the same time, so we have to be careful of how the French government use this relationship. We realize, for example, in the last 3 months with the COVID-19 crisis, we saw that the new French government now in France has changed his positions against concerning the organization, concerning the organization of the referendum. We saw, for example, some of the political positions that has been made by the Osaria here in Nouméa, in relation with the French government in Paris. We saw that now we don't have the support from the French government in terms of political vision. and we saw too that the French government is now impartial, as like before. We usually had most of the successful government. We usually supporting the process of decolonization in terms of how call that gathering everybody to find a consensus concerning the organization of a referendum. Now, for example, we saw that last month they were supporting the right wing, the anti-independentist political parties, to use the French, which is illegally and at the same time we saw that actually we didn't have any communication with the Prime Minister and even the Minister for Minister des Outre-mer, French territories. So we have to be careful, and we have to be more strategically how could that strong, because we don't know what the French French government is offering us in this process.
Thanks, Charles. We have a number of questions coming in through the Q&A function. Anyone who'd like to submit a question can, at the bottom of the screen, there's a button for Q&A. You can list your question there and we'll relay them to the panelists. Also, for people who are listening on Facebook, the live stream, they can submit their questions through Facebook and they'll once again be relayed to the panelists. And I might start posing a question that's come in from one member of the audience. With just over 2 weeks until the independence referendum, what's the general feeling in New Caledonia about the vote, and whether events such as COVID-19 or the current dispute over the Goro nickel project have influenced people? Magali, you've been actively campaigning as part of the Yes campaign for independence. What's your sense of how people are reacting on the ground, given the situation in 2020 with the pandemic is a different environment than 2 years ago?
Yes, thank you, Nick, for the question. And for the audience. It's the environment is different. If we're gonna have a third one, the environment is going to be different again. 2 years, it's quite long, but it's quite fast as well. And for us, what happened for this second referendum is we had two elections between the first referendum and this one. We have a provincial referendum election, sorry. And so we change our Congress, we change our government, and we also have municipal elections. We change our mayors. So for this referendum, we also change the elected members of the Congress of New Caledonia. So we now have a new strategy coming from the non-campaign, the opposite of the idea of the independence. We can feel on the ground when we're campaigning that people want more informations, more and more and more. You know, we're talking about independence in 2020. We're facing young training Kanaks. We have now young intellectual Kanak. So we're talking about independence in this millennium. It's quite a big challenge. People want more and more information. We're campaigning for the independence. We're now having social media, like back in 10 years, we didn't have that kind of campaigning. So we can feel that people want more and more informations, and they listening, they going their own studies when they have one questions. So we can't campaigning in 2020 like we did to campaign 10 years ago. So people, yes, want more and more information. We're giving more information. We're giving more informations. We're talking about, for this campaign, we're talking about what's going to happen after the yes. I mean, the Monday in the morning, we give information on. There's another process after the yes to pull out from the French Constitution. Is that kind of thing that we're just talking about this now, like 10 or 20 years ago when we were talking about independence. It was like, oh, that's we no longer talking about independence. Now it's like we can feel it. So yes, people want more information. That's the main thing.
A question has come in from Jean-Gabriel Mongui asking about an article in the newspaper Le Monde that's just been published. You've mentioned that there's a new generation of people, buying into the discussion. People who are 18 years old going to vote for the first time weren't born when the Namur Accord was signed, let alone when the troubles of the 1980s occurred. And Jean-Gabriel asks that a group of local intellectuals, including Emmanuel Chibal, the son of the late Jean-Marie Chibal, has written in Le Monde, "We are slowly evolving into a Creole community. We have to move away from ideologies and the decolonization discourse." I wonder whether any of you would be willing to comment on that intervention in the referendum debate by some leading figures about whether, the call for decolonization, the call for independence is out of place.
Can I just...
I don't know whether anyone would like to leap in there.
If I put all the questions you were talking about so far, can I put it differently, and I'll address a response to Jean-Gabriel Mongui, whom I say hello and all my love. The question is, how is 2020 or 2020 different from 2018? Everything is different. In 2 years' time, everything is different. Because people are growing, because people are changing, but also because the context in whom we are asked to is different. We didn't agree on the date. We didn't agree on the fact of they today, and that's a position from the state, are able to use the national French flag. What is different? Today, we have numbers. As you guys know, the system of voting in New Caledonia is not compulsory. So now we know that over 33,000 of people didn't bother vote. We have to understand why they didn't want to vote. Who are they? When I say that, it's because we have seen, or we understand in our precision in wanting to know how we were voting in 2018, not only the youth is not voting. And I want to say that today, they are voting. They know why they are voting, most of them. But why at that time, let me rephrase this. We are coming out 30 years ago of a situation which was qualified as a civil war in Kanaki 30 years ago. So, of course, we cannot say you that came through history in Kanaki, you're not the responsible for it because you are today 18. But we cannot deny that happened. Today, we cannot deny that it's been 30 years where people have struggled. People died for this fight. We cannot ignore that. I'm not talking about cruelty. I'm talking about Kanaki identity, Caledonian identity. We cannot deny that people went through a lot of harassment, a lot of struggle. And that is very important. Of course, we have to redefine. Of course, today we have intellectuals. But we don't need to be intellectuals to know what we want for our country, do we? We don't need to transform everything in concept to exist, because that would be an error. One cannot deny his history. His history is the path for the future. It doesn't mean that you are responsible for what the elders have done. And everything is not to be thrown in the rubbish. We have to learn from our mistakes. Do I go too far? Who do have to stop? Nick, I'm talking to you.
That's been posed from Alfred, I think Alfred Suakai, in the Forum Secretariat. And it ties into this question. As we mentioned at the beginning, this has been a long process. You mentioned 30 years since the conflict of the 1980s. There have been unique elements in the Namur Accord process. The delay till holding a decision on political status, the fact that there are 3 referenda, some unique attempts to bring customary authorities into an advisory role in the parliament, and so on. And I wonder, at the same time, there have been tensions between supporters and opponents of independence, a whole range of factors that have worked and haven't worked. The question asked from Alfred Suakai, what are the strengths and weaknesses of New Caledonia's unique self-determination process? What can the world learn from the experience thus far?
Didn't we answer to that question so far?
Yeah, I think so. Are there other elements, though? Are there other elements that you think have been ignored? Maybe I could throw one in. New Caledonia, drawing on French law, has a system called the loi de parité, where the electoral system ensures that women have representation equal to men in the parliamentary institutions. A number of political parties are led by women in New Caledonia, or have been over the last 20 years. And indeed, the first elected leader of a Pacific Island country was Marie-Noël Temereau in 2004. Her vice president was also a woman. Given that many neighbouring Melanesian countries have very poor representation by women in their national legislatures, I wonder if you could comment about the strengths and weaknesses of that, what was a French law, bringing women into the electoral system. All 3 participants might like to comment, given the sometimes tension between these laws and Kanak custom.
So who's the first?
Magali, please.
Okay, thank you. I'm the younger plus, so maybe it's why. you can feel in this country that there's a woman within the parliament. You can feel it every day. You can feel it daily. Since the law of the la loi de la parité from France came in, so I mean, Patricia and I are elected members of the Northern Province. You can feel in each laws now that there's a woman. It is not as easy that it can shows. Like for us as Kanak women, we must be the voice of the people, not only the women, also the young, and also, I mean, we are elected as men, but it has to come to for a short time, for time, like it's not easy like it can be, or it shows. Being like talking front of the public, or being on the front, it's quite sometimes still sometimes difficult, but well, we can go for it. And so I know that we are the only one country from the Melanesia that there's a elected woman in our Congress. So I can encourage, please, our brothers from the Pacific to bring more women in their parliament. They will really gain for it, because when there's a woman in the room, you can tell that there's something different.
Nick.
Charles, please.
Yes, I just want to answer about your question before, that question about the parity. The question was, I think, what the world can learn about
experience.
Experience. In my view and analysis, I think what the world can learn about this process of decolonization is how we brought the French government in negotiation. I think if you see all the decolonization process, most of the decolonization process have been end with the war, and many people have been died. And that's the original thing with this struggle, with this process of colonization that we engage in this country, is to bring French government to end this decolonization with successful. I think this is important because we need that the French government to give us this country with the full capacity of the people to manage economically and to have the society more viable. Because if we look at the back about some of the experiences in Africa now, and some of the countries in Latin America or other in Asia, we saw some of the former countries colonized by the most occidental countries are having difficulties. And now we can say that the negotiation, the negotiation strategy that were used by the Fenkais was the main successful, key of the success of this decolonization process. And that's why we say that now we are ready to become an independent country. Now we have a lot of people who went to France, to overseas to train, and now they are more competent and have the capacity to manage the country. Even in terms of economic and social resilience, now we say that we are ready. That's why we say that that's one of the one of the experiences and constructive challenges.
C'est bon.
Thank you. Did you want to add anything to that question?
Yeah, I've seen some of the questions, so I'll try to sort of. We are 250,070 in Kanak in Nouvelle-Calédonie. So it's not a question of, even if I'm the first to say it's really important that women are there where they have to be. But for me, the struggle of the Kanak people is not a question of age, of sex. It's really the struggle of a country, of a people. Why am I saying that? Magali is right. We have the possibility today to be where we are in political assembly. But it doesn't mean that we have to stop in wanting what we want for our rights as women. It doesn't mean that everything is okay. And it's like, as I said before, Nick, you know that I work a lot on custom land. Today, when we talk with the custom elders, they don't see us as women, but they really see us as valeur ajoutée, resource, strength. And that is what is really important here. I don't really like the debate on opposing men and women, or it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And we are here to face that. Mm-hmm. Let's not be paternalistic about it. If I do have to do that where I am, I'll do it. Because it's very difficult, though I am represented in the Congress of New Caledonia, when I'm looking at what happened this morning, for example, it's very difficult for a woman or a Kanak woman to make what she thinks. But not because she's a woman, but because she's capable of thinking by herself. And she's capable to apporter sa contribution à l'humanité. And that's very important for me because, once again, we are only 250,000. And what I really want to say is that we are few and many at the same times. But what is really important, did I say a lot really important? What is to sort of look at thoroughly is le corps électoral. Je m'excuse, hein, le corps électoral spécial qui a été mis en place, et Nick, tu le traduiras, est quelque chose de formidable. Le corps électoral spécial qui a été mis exclusivement pour le référendum, dans la mesure où on savait pertinemment que la France, en tant qu'État colonial, depuis des siècles, a fait en sorte que l'on soit minoritaire chez nous. Et ça, pour la classe politique dans le Pacifique et dans le monde, je pense que c'est une leçon à avoir.
So Patricia's saying that one of the key features of the current situation is the restricted electoral role for the local institutions and particularly the referendum, because the French state over time has made the indigenous Kanak people a minority in the country, and that is a central part of the context. Sorry, I've just given a brief summary.
Mm.
related to this question about the weight, the size of New Caledonia, is the geopolitics of the region. And we have a question coming to that. During his visit to New Caledonia and Australia in 2018, French President Emmanuel Macron raised concern about China's growing influence in the Pacific region and what it might mean for an independent New Caledonia. China at the moment is New Caledonia's largest trading partner, particularly through the sale of nickel ore to smelters in China through the northern province. So the question has come from one of the audience. In 2020, what is the general feeling towards China in New Caledonia, and how would panelists like to see an independent New Caledonia interact with larger world powers in terms of foreign policy? How will New Caledonia, an independent New Caledonia, relate to China, to France, to Australia, closest neighbour, to other major powers?
Charles, Magali?
Charles,
Yes.
would you like to start?
Yeah. I think during this campaign, most of the questions that have been asked by the population is effectively concerning the how could that not the invasion, but the relationship with China in case we become independent country. And because we are living now with this, how could that, with the campaign engaged by the superpower countries like US or mostly most of the European countries against China. But in terms of relation policy, if New Caledonia become independent, it would be clear. It would be clear. I think we are clear on that question that if New Caledonia become independent tomorrow, the first thing is to establish a relationship with most of the countries that we are sharing the same values. Secondly, we will be sharing, we set up a relationship with the countries that we have cultural and economical interest. And that's why it is important that most of the policy, relation policy, I mean, external policy of New Caledonia, of an independent country, will be set up or to defend our interests first. And secondly, we will be looking of which countries that we can also have more economical and commercial links. For example, actually, we have an offshore Kanak smelter in South Korea. So that's some of those countries that we need to set up or economic and bilateral relationship. And also, we have also an equal commercial link with China. But we know that effectively we are actually under the international political pressure made by most of the superpower countries. But New Caledonia, as an independent country, tomorrow will be clear that if we have interest with China, because we have economical interests, we are going to have a relationship. Like France actually, or Australia actually, even though they are against China, but they still have economical relationship with China. So why would they not have this possibility to have economical and relationship with China? Because we are small countries, and that's why we say that Kanaki independent country is like Australian and France and most of the European countries. So we need effectively to look properly with which countries we have economical interests or political interests, and effectively, if tomorrow that China can be an important country for New Caledonia or for Kanaki, why not? But effectively, what I say that the policy, the future, the vision of the Kanaki independent state in terms of relationship will be done according with the economical and national interest.
interest. That's it. Charles already said everything, but I would like just only add one thing. It's concerning our new relationships with China or other countries. As Charles said, that independence is for us to open our doors on the international level. Independence doesn't mean for us, for the FLNKS, to close our doors and being like only independence. For us, it's to lead us on the international level. Yes.
See.
Sure, yes.
I'm not gonna add any. I think Charles said it really promptly and clearly. Let's not be mistaken here. I'm not against French. I speak French since I'm 6 years old, though I do speak my own language. I breathe French. That's the colonization. I didn't choose, but it's a fact. My history, I know the French history may be more than the French themselves sometimes. So it's not of saying, I mean, my choice tomorrow is a normal way of doing. What we are saying is that we come to an extent where these people is asking for sovereignty, plenty sovereignty. And what's wrong with having cooperation with China and others? What we are saying is just that the fact that the difference is that we will choose how we want to put and the level we want to put in that relationship. We choose as a free state, as a state. That is all the difference. Why can't I make mistakes? Why can't I? I have to make mistakes to go further. So what Magali is saying and Charles is that we have been doing it already through our project, but it's the capacity or the possibility of choosing what I want and putting in the middle the interest of New Caledonia and all the people that are living on this land. And that's what is aiming us.
Okay. Our time is coming to an end, and I thank you very much for your comments and feedback. There's one final question that has come in. There's a number of questions that have come in. Unfortunately, time is slipping away and we don't have time to answer them all. But I think this is a serious and important question. In 2018, the Yes campaign, the Campaign for Independence, received 43% support for New Caledonians wanting to be independent. The question is, will you do better this time?
Of course.
It's a challenge. It's a time of COVID. It's a time of economic uncertainty. It's a time where the loyalists, the opponents of independence, have formed a coalition uniting 6 parties. Are you sure that you'll do better?
Of course, Nick. Yes, and because okay, I'm going. As Patricia said in the beginning, we have 3 polls, 3 times to express for or against the independence. This is what the Nouméa Accords put on the table to make it happen. The second one, this one, it's maybe the more strategic one, maybe, yeah? Why? Because we know that the first in November 18, in November, the first referendum that we made it for 43%. We must go ahead for this one, but we also know that there's another one. So it means that like for this second one, more like for to educate again. We're campaigning to win this time because, as Charles said, none of the on a country over the world are ready as we are in this country for the independence. We have that process for 40 years. So we'll do it better. I believe that Patricia already answered that regarding that we going to the also more to the people who didn't vote for the first referendum, who they are and why they didn't vote. So we're campaigning like we call door to door. We're just going to the families, talking to the elders, talking to the kids, the women of the house. So we're campaigning a little bit differently. So means that we're going to have a better result, but we will win this time.
Okay, on that note, we might wrap up. To Patricia Goa, to Charles Weah, Magali Tangal, thank you very much for your participation. And thank you to all the people in the audience who've stuck with us, and particularly the questions that have come in. I'm sorry there were still a few questions there, but we've been unable to take more, and I think we could continue this conversation. Certainly in the weeks ahead. Griffith University, Griffith Asia Institute Pacific Hub has a number of resources on the website about the current situation in New Caledonia that people seeking more detailed background can access. And I'd like to hand over now to the director of the Pacific Hub at Griffith to give a vote of thanks and to thank our participants today. Dr. Tess Newton-Kane from the Pacific Hub. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nick. À nos invités d'honneur, je vous remercie de nous donner vos temps et de partager vos pensées avec si générosité aujourd'hui. Merci beaucoup. I think on behalf of us all, I can say that we're all enriched from having had this opportunity to learn from you and to benefit from your insights and analysis at this very critical time and obviously this very busy time for the people of New Caledonia Kanaki. I'd like to say thank you to Nick for convening the panel and for facilitating today's conversation, which has certainly added greatly to my understanding, and I'm sure the understanding of many others, of the issues that are so important for the forthcoming referendum in New Caledonia. And I think, as we've touched on today, they're important primarily for the people that live there, but also they're very important for the rest of the region. And certainly that's one of the reasons that we'll be watching very closely what happens over the next few weeks in New Caledonia. I'd also like to thank the members of the Griffith Asia Institute team who've worked so hard to bring this Pacific Outlook event together, including Stefan Armbruster, who's another member of the Pacific Hub. And I understand that he was the one that got the ball rolling a few weeks ago, further to a conversation with Nick. And to those of you who've joined us in our audience, thank you for supporting this event. It is very much part of what we, at the Pacific Hub we really would like to do, which is to give our audiences an opportunity to hear from the people of the Pacific about the things that they care about the things that they talk about among themselves, and about the things that are important to them. And we really value your support in being part of the work that we do in amplifying those voices and improving the understanding of Australians and others of what's really going on in this very important region of which we are part here at the Pacific Hub. I would reiterate Nick's suggestion about our Focus on New Caledonia Resources Corner on the Pacific Hub website. There are lots of things there, items written by Nick and reports by other people, conversation pieces. The recording of this event will also be posted on there when it's ready, and we'll be adding to that as we get closer to the referendum and in the immediate aftermath. So if you're looking for where to go to find out about what's going on and what it all means, we hope that you'll make good use of that. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I will wish you all bonne journée and bring this event to a close.
Thank you.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup.